recording on, which I've just done, and I will make the recording available afterwards, and we'll email you all with a link. So just to get you going first thing this afternoon, there's a poll for you to have a play with. Sorry about the slurping at this end. Someone just delivered me a nice cup of tea. And if I'm anywhere like you are, it's freezing here today. There was a good dousing of snow overnight, which wasn't really very expected. Just having a look, there's 91% of you who are on who have voted. And there's a couple of people who couldn't get on because it was fully booked, but it's a shame that not everybody's here. There's more people arriving as I speak, so I shall give them just a couple more minutes and leave that poll on, and then I will let you see how much trouble I'm in this afternoon having having a look at what the results are. There you go. Well, so the 30% of you who have said nothing, well, hopefully by the time you leave today, you'll know something. To the 10% of what's been advertised, you'll know a lot more before you get home. 50% a little and dangerous, 10% a little more. I wonder who that person was. That's one of you, I think, for 10%, or maybe two of you. At least there's nobody on here that says they're an expert. Okay, to the presentation this afternoon, and there's still people arriving, so I'm sort of waffling a bit as I see a number of people haven't quite got their audio on yet. Tin Can, to the rest of us, it's known as the Experience API, and a number of people have asked me on the other sessions that we've run of this as to why there's a different set of names. So I'll give it to you as it was given to me. It has always been called the Experience API. It's part of a group of architectures known as TLA, three learning architectures, I think it's known as. So it's one of the three. Its project name was Tin Can, and everybody took on the name of Tin Can because everybody quite liked it during the early days of build. There are two or three major players within the group who have built Tin Can. One of them is Mike Rusticky, and by the way, you all have got your microphones on, so if you want to mute yourself, please do so. If you want to speak, please do so. One of the others is Saltbox, and there are a number of other players who have been involved, including Question Mark and others. Mike Rusticky decided to register the name Tin Can and set up tincan.com, which caused an almighty hoo-ha in the States. They reverted it back to the Experience API, which really it should be known as anyway. But I think that there'll be a war of words for quite some time. Don't really care what it's called. It may end up still being called Tin Can, and if it does, then absolutely great. Okay, you've had the poll. So what can you expect in the next sort of 55 minutes? First, some promises from me. I'm not going to get too technical or geeky. I'm going to get a little technical. I might get a little geeky, I'm sorry. Those of you who know me will know that it's very easy to get geeky in this. I won't try to sell you any management systems. I won't try and change your LMS. I'm not going to recommend authoring tools. I am going to show you some cool stuff. I'm going to tell you a little about some of our other tutorials. That's my 2-minute advert. I am letting you know that I am available to help you get more information. I do work as a consultant, so there's my that's why we do these for free, and I am able to provide other services in learning, design, and creation. So there's my advert out of the way. I'll show you this one at the end. This is how to get hold of me. I'm going to mute you all for just a second. If you want to be unmuted, just let me know in the chat room. I'll open the chat room up at this end so I can see it. Afternoon, Niall. I see you've said good afternoon to everybody. That's how to get hold of me if you want to get hold of me afterwards. Please do so if you're not sure about anything that I've said and want to know more. If you want to know more about the geeky stuff, I'm going to try and keep it to a minimum. Then please do contact me and let me know, and I'll put that back up again at the end later on. This afternoon's Tin Can API tutorial is brought to you by thelearningcoach.co.uk. It's one of our range of free seminars. We do have a number of other seminars out there, which I'll just tell you about later on very briefly. But they are changing somewhat. I'll let you know about that when we get to it. So today, I'm just going to cover what is Tin Can API. I'm going to talk about metrics versus analytics and why there's a difference. I'm going to talk about the differences between SCORM and Tin Can and how actually they work together. I'm going to talk about what is an LRS. I'm going to talk about the statement and show you a statement. That's the geeky bit. And I'm going to give you an example that we can actually all try out for ourselves and hopefully leave you some time for some questions. In fact, I intend to leave you some time for some questions. Okay, so what will xAPI, the Experience API, or Tin Can do for you? Both of my phones are dinging away. I did something with Vodafone before, and they won't stop sending me texts, so I may have to turn the darn things off in a minute. It's going to allow us to track learning that's not just e-learning, and I think this is the biggest single driver for me that pricked my ears up and got me involved at the very beginning. Up until now, we had to start everything from the LMS, and we no longer have to do it. We can track and get information from learning which is offline, which is in a native app if it was on a mobile device. We don't have to start from the LMS. And I think that's really a very, very big key in how this moves forwards. We're going to be able to record face-to-face interventions by very simply putting a form on the web that a teacher fills out or a trainer fills out, and it will write a statement to the LRS, the Learning Record Store. We're going to be able to attach a record of doing something, and I think this is key in knowing and understanding all about Tin Can, is that it's not what you did and when you did it, it's what you're doing. It's an I did this statement. One of the big things that we've been playing around with is actually recording the direction people go. So we can actually track people's direction through a piece of learning, which is a major step forward in actually understanding how people are doing the learning, what they're doing when they're in the learning, and where they went. And I explain that a bit more as we go on. So we can look at, and that will allow us to record decision processes. And if we can get people to make different decisions, we can track a change behavior. And of course, we will provide data. It will provide data to analyze performance and value. And if you want to know more about that, then there's a paper that I wrote called The Environment Model, which you can find either at neillasher.com or looking at the eLearning Guild. I think there were people who published it in the first place. But that will show you how you can actually analyze performance and decide value. So for me, it's a step towards the end of ROI. So I put an example up for you to have a play with. As long as you don't all do this at the same time, it'll be fine. Actually, even if you do, it won't make any difference. The example we put up is a piece of SMS technology, a bit of SMS learning. If you send the word start to that phone number, you will get a response. Dive in, write it down on a bit of paper. Don't have to panic. I'm going to leave it on the bottom of the next 3 or 4 slides for you as I move forwards. But you'll get some instructions, follow the instructions. And what we'll actually be able to do, we've got some good data in there now. We'll be able to actually have a look at the data as we move forwards today. So as we get a bit further in, I'll actually show you the live data sitting in an LRS. So metrics versus analytics, why? Metrics are what we already know from our learning management systems. Who did what, when they did it, what they scored, if that's what it is. I'll have to mute everybody because somebody's making a noise in the background. If you want something, give me a shout through the text, through the chat box, and I'll open your microphone back up again. Steve, write it down, do it later. It's not, I see Steve's put out there, it's a bit like a Faraday cage, no signal. If you write down the number and do it later, you can do it at any time. There's no time commitment in this. So do it when you get home later on if you want to. Metrics is what we've got, what we've had since the very beginning. 1996 along came SCORM in the early days, believe it or not. Department of Defense didn't get involved until 2003, so that's why most people say that it's been around for 10 years, but it's actually been around for quite some time longer. What it's given us is a set of metrics: who did what, where they did it, when they did it, and what they scored. But actually we've learned very little. Analytics is in a different place. It's what people do and how they do it and what they're doing now. And from that, we can start to design and think about which groups of people did certain things in certain ways and be able to actually look at who is liable to do what in the future. It's really the major difference between it. If we have a look at analytics, the way we build an analytic, I'm sorry, that one looks a little bit out of focus today. I don't know why. We define goals, we build KPIs, we collect data. The key is collecting data, and that's something that we don't have. Although we have all this metric data from the LMSs, we are going to have to wait a while once we get running with the LRS and with Tin Can to actually be able to understand some of the data that we're getting. And you'll be able to see that when we look in a live one later on. The analyzation of the data is something that we are all talking about at the moment as to what are the best ways to analyze the data we've got. It's very easy to use the data to make it say whatever we want it to say, as you know, most people, or a lot of people can do. We do get the opportunity to test alternatives, implement new alternatives, and then there's a looping going on back to the analyzing of data. And eventually it loops back and starts all over again to the next stage where we define the next goal based upon what we know. If you look at Amazon, not if I look at Amazon, because I'll tell you a story about that in a minute, but if you look at Amazon.com and you log in amazon.co.uk, you get recommendations. Now, they're not bad. The recommendations aren't bad based upon the fact that they know that the group of people just like you who have bought the things that you buy, who read the books that you buy, who listen to the music you buy, who do the searches you do searches of because they're all sharing data in the background, actually are liable to buy or read the next book or buy the next product. And they get it pretty good. They're a bit screwed with me because my wife uses my account to buy her books, and we do read very different books. So I do get some very strange recommendations in my book list. And I'm often told when I can and when I can't look at various bits before birthdays and Christmas as to work out who's been bought what by working out what else they're trying to sell me. But they know based upon analytics, and anybody who's got a website who hasn't got Google Analytics running, I suggest you go and implement Google Analytics. It's free. And actually start understanding and looking at the data. It's a real minefield out there to see the direction that people take through websites, where they go, where they come from, why they made the decisions they made, how many of them actually get to fill a form in when they get further on. If you go and have a look, gone the wrong way, I'm sorry. Go and have a look at my website. This is neillasher.com. This is running Google Analytics in the background. I can see where you go, when you get there, what you clicked on, what you're liable to do next, which of the articles you've read or haven't read, and I can start putting people into different groupings. I shall move on. So, how about using this in learning? What can we do with it? If you go to that website and download one of the articles there, which is called the environment model, it actually shows you a real life scenario and actually using it in learning. If any of you have been using the SMS so far, what you're actually doing is being tracked. We'll have a look at that very shortly and see who is and who isn't. Just having a look at the screen to see how many people have now logged in. See how many are here. Now, in learning, it's going to take us a while to understand the new instructional design methods that are needed. We've already started working these out, already started seeing what we can do. And the new starting place is to actually try and design before you start what it is that you're actually going to want to see at the end. What are we going to want to measure? How are we going to want to measure it? And what is necessary for people to do or not to do? And we can show you that by looking at the difference between SCORM and Tin Can, so we can get a real feel of a difference, and you'll begin to see what I'm talking about. The old way was to connect to SCORM. The old way was there was an LMS and there was content. You signed into the LMS, you got your content, and it registered what you've done. SCORM backwards and forwards through the SCO, and that was as far as it went. The new LRS concept says, I did this, I did that, I did the other, all the way through a piece of learning. So it's not just one record. We can have multiple records. Let me blow up the picture for you so you can see it a bit bigger. And you'll see that we can have statements that come in from the desktop while you're using it, from the mobile device while you're using it, from the classroom learning while you're there and doing it, and multiple statements going on the whole time from any place, anywhere. If I send you 3 Word documents with 3 links from a web page, I can tell you which order you looked at them in. That might be actually important to the way that you learned whatever you learned. And that's one of the things that we're now playing with, experimenting with, and beginning to see some really good new instructional design techniques, which actually is part of there's another free tutorial that I run based upon instructional design for the modern world. You might want to go and look that one up when I finish. The old way, as I said, was who did what, when they did it, why they did it, what they scored, did they finish? And if you have a look at the 5 stages of the SCO, we have a not started, we have an incomplete, we have a completed, a passed, and a failed. They're the only 5 stages, or 5 places that SCORM will allow the status of a course to be at. If it's incomplete, we know very little. We don't really know where or what they did or how far they got, unless we've got it broken up into groupings and multiple SCOs. And unfortunately, we tend to do that by putting little tests all the way through and recording lots of tests, which incidentally, in a recent piece of a recent survey that I saw, it was the single most hated part of an e-learning course was the test, which I thought was quite interesting. The difference is the I did this, and as many I did this as we need to actually gain data and have a look at it. I'm going to flick past that for the minute. I'm going to take you straight into the LRS. Now, this is Wax LRS. If you go to waxlrs.com, it's produced by Saltbox. It's a free one. It's out there. You can play with it. You can go and have a look at it. I'm going to take you into it as well very shortly. But the Learning Record Store is a system that records a number of items which are called statements. A statement is written in a particular way, and I'm going to take you through a statement so you can understand that. The key to understanding how the LRS and Tin Can works is to actually understand the statement. If you understand the statement and you understand what the statement can send and how it sends it, then you can implement it into anything and design it however you like. It's not the easiest thing to get your head around on day one, I'm going to be very honest with you, but it is certainly something that is worth getting your head around. This actually is looking at the activity stream some time ago. I took this screenshot when there were 9 statements in it. If we go and have a look at the live one, happens to be on the right screen, Neil. There we go. You'll see if I refresh this, there are now 179 statements in there. We've got some from today. I'll look at these in a little bit more detail shortly. So it's had a number of more statements in. I can begin to look at this in a different way. The statement is broken up into a number of sections. It looks at the project, which you can see at the beginning, which is named by you. It looks at who the person was, what they've done, and I'll explain to you this is the verb, and what they've done it to. And then on top of that, we have another level, which is called context. We can actually add a context into the system. I'm going to move forward a slide if it lets me do it. We can have a look at it graphically. We can have a look at it via a geomap, so we can see where people were. If there's a particular piece of learning that people are doing in different places, we can actually start to look at this on where they were in the world. Geomapping also allows us, or will allow us, to do it within organizations in which room they were within a building, once we get the hardware into the building to actually be able to geomap within a building. I'm going to bring you up to, I'm going to give you a second poll. I want to ask a question of you before we look at the actual in-depth looking at the statement and how that works. But here's a question on metrics versus analytics. Do you like the idea of analytics over metrics is what I'm asking now, based upon what you've heard so far. Is this something that you will like to consider more? Is this something that you might find a little bit scary? You can be honest, it's all right. I will allow you to. So far, everybody who has voted, oh well, I got a split here. I got a split between I like the idea of analytics being cool versus I can't wait to get started, but someone's just voted that I'm finding it difficult to know what to do with these things. Well, you will do at the moment, and I'm going to be very honest with you. It's not the easiest thing to get your head into, but once we have a look at the actual statement, we might find a little bit more. Actually, everybody has voted, so I'm going to show you what people said. And that's about the same that we have all the way through across the world, is that many people think this idea is cool. Many people can't wait to get started, but nobody's really sure how to do it. So let's show you how to do it. This is a statement. Sorry, this is the geeky bit, but it's worth looking at. I've tried to put this into both geek and English at the same time. A statement is made up of three simple sections: an actor, a verb, and an object. The actor is the person who is actually doing the learning, is involved in whatever is going on. The verb is what they did. So I experienced, I explored, I read, I opened. I'll show you a whole list of those in a few minutes. And the object is what you did it to. If you have a look and see a bit of code down the bottom, ignore the code, but the code here is saying here's the actor. There's a project name in it. There's a bit of code here that I'll show you. It's actually picking out who you are, so it's doing it via your email. You'll notice here this is showing it by the email, and if I have a look at the code that created that to happen, which is here. Ignore the code for the minute. You'll see that it's taken it out of a SQL server, that it says select the email from where the originator's phone number was. So I've picked out your phone number basically and found out what your email is. If you're not sure how I did that, then if I go into the actual back end of the database, sorry, Sarah, I'm going to do this to you for the minute. I shall browse the actual data, and it's probably down the bottom. Let's see if I can find the one, because it's put it into a funny order. Darned if I can see the name I'm looking for. It's good, Neil. I'm looking for Tara. Sorry, Tara. If I look down here for Tara, somebody's probably already seen it and I can't see it. Maybe this hasn't refreshed properly. I show why. There's another page of these. That would have helped, wouldn't it? Here's Tara. Look, there we go. I picked up a phone number and have dropped it in there. And there's a lot that I can see here. I can see that Tara got to 54. I can see that this person here only first got through and answered the email. I can see that two people only got to the point of sending the word start to it, but never actually responded to it or haven't had the response back. And I see that they're both in places that are abroad, which might take some time for the text to get back. I see that someone's gone all the way through to list, and I think this was yesterday. Somebody's actually played around with the breaking scenario. So as you can see, we can pick up the email. That is the only thing that we know at the moment that makes somebody unique. If there are two John Smiths, they will have different email addresses. One will be John Smith 2. And that's something that we do know is a definite. You'll notice the verb in here is experienced. And this is hard code in this one. And the object is a particular object on this one was I picked out was how old was Barbara. Let me pull these apart for you. Now, if you think they're hard to write with all that code, by the way, there are tools like this which will write the code for you. No, you're absolutely right. There were lots of names that you can recognize from your Twitter. You don't have to learn to write this code. This code is not easy to write. It's written in JSON. However, there are tools that are out there that will actually create these for you. And it is gobbledygook. It's JSON, it's JavaScript object notation. And the only reason to put this slide up, this is the geeky bit, the only real geeky bit, is to show there's a particular method in the way they're written. You'll see there's a curly brackets at both ends of it with the string and the value in the object in between it. I shall say no more about that unless you want to know more about it later. So 3 parts. The actor, this is the who. You'll notice this one's hard-coded. It's got Neil Lasher and mail. My mail is my email address. Now, obviously, I can pick that out of a SQL Server database as I did in the other in that other piece of code. If anybody wants to re-see it again, just tell me in the chat box and I'll bring it back up. So the actor is obviously quite important. The actor you'll see here are a number of people and they get shown via their email address. Now, if we want to, we can actually give the actor a description and we can actually put their real name in. So we can pull the real name out of a learning management system because we've looked up their email address to see where the match is. And we could actually be looking at this in real names rather than looking at it in email addresses. Now, the verb is the most important part. This is the bit that a lot of people are having a lot of trouble actually getting their head around. You'll notice here is a hard-coded verb that's called experienced. This is the activity. And there are lots of activities. But just to give you an idea, if somebody looks at the content, or a number of people look at the content, there would be a difference between experienced and explored. If this is your decision, remember you're going to actually design these. There is no set ones to use. You can actually choose your own that actually fit as long as they are a verb. But I would suggest that somebody experienced the content because somebody told them to experience it, whereas somebody who found it on their own actually would have explored the content. And when I look at the actual analytics and the data later, and I start looking at the difference between who experienced versus who explored, I can start to learn which groups of people found this on their own, which groups of people had to be sent to it by somebody else to go and find it. And I think you will find, you will probably agree with me if you're a trainer, that somebody who's been told to go somewhere and have a look at something may actually have a different view of it than someone who found it on their own. And in fact, somebody who was given information about something and went and saw it has an idea of what they're going to find, whereas the person who explores it may actually find things that are not what they're expecting and therefore may not get as much out of it. But there might be a completely different side to that. And these are the things that we need to start to design into our learning before we start. You'll see in here, most of these are experienced, and I'll show you some that are slightly different in the live one in a moment. But here are the type of verbs, and you'll see that the type of result we actually expect from the verbs that we're getting, but completed, past and failed still exists. So we're not going to be replacing SCORM, we're going to be interacting with SCORM. So I would see that the vast majority of learning management system providers, and actually I couldn't get it today quick enough. Michael Ruska, who runs Performance Solutions in America, who heads up all of the staff who work for ADL who are writing this, was going to send me over a list of all the LMS providers who have already agreed to build TinCan into their systems. And by the way, at the last eLearning Guild DevLearn in November, we were informed that not only will SCORM be using xAPI, but also AICC. So this is the first time ever that we've got both standardizations now moving towards one combined standard, which actually I think is quite an exciting thing to see in the world of learning. We're going to get a standardization right the way across. This reminds me of the early days of cassette tape, where if you're old enough like me, you'll know that there was Philips and there was Sony. There were two different types of cassette tapes out there. One was slightly bigger. That was before we got to 8-track. That was the third argument. It's a bit like the VHS and Betamax argument, I suppose. So what did we do, whatever we did too? And that's the object. And the object actually is quite important because as a simple statement, we can have a description like this one. How old was Barbara? If you're doing the using the SMS system, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't used it yet, I'll put the number back up again. You should go and have a look at it. It'll make some sense to you. But we can actually get to a deeper level as well. And don't want to get too geeky with you, but when we get to the object, we can actually start looking at the context of the object as well. So we can actually drive down to another level. And then it actually becomes quite interesting as to how we got to an object, where we came from, where we're going to, and some context of the object because of X. And actually, we can get into some quite depths with regards to the analytics and the data. For those of you who are worried about telling an LMS or LRS that someone has passed or failed or got a score, here's a piece of code that does exactly that. And this is the bit of code that one would use and is already built in, which literally sets the right place as passed within the verb. So it's not going to, we're not going to try and do things completely different than the way SCORM has done it. It's written by the same people who wrote SCORM. We do see the two interacting together. So if you never got a chance to write down the number earlier, go ahead and write the number down now. But I'm going to show you what took place for those of you who did do it. If I have a quick look and see who has done it. Well, there's a number of you who have had a play with it by the looks of the information that's there. In fact, I ought to refresh that, see if anybody's done it since. Got any further. And this is live into just a database that I've thrown up to play with it. Let's have a look at the second page. There are a number of names in there. I'm just having a look at the date. So 11-2. Let's go back to the one before. I think there's a couple of 11-2s on there as well. All right, so there's a few of you who have been playing with it, which is good. What took place? Very simply, we got you to send a message just saying start. We either knew you or we didn't know you. If we knew you, we welcomed you back. So if you want to go and try clicking, if you've done it once already and you send start to it again, it will come back and recognize you and say hello. If we didn't know you, it will ask you who you are. It will write that into a database and update it. It gave you a set of instructions, and then you had a number of things to follow. You had a silly thing about how old was Barbara. A picture of Barbara if you wanted to have a look at it. It asked you some questions. You acted upon the replies. And at each stage, it was writing a statement. If we go back and have a look at the statements, you'll see that somebody here at the top only got to 44 and never completed it. Anybody who got to 54 completed it. And then there's some people who've gone further. Nigel Payne had a look at the anti-money laundering. Somebody asked for info. Somebody asked for help. A couple of people have looked at breaking. Some people haven't got past the demo stage at the very beginning. And today I can see Niall, here we go. Niall going to name and shame, put in his email, was asked for his email address, put his email address in, but didn't go any further. So I'll ask him in a minute why. Turn your microphones on, guys. Anybody want to comment, do so now. This is too noisy. There you go. No, you're too busy listening to me. All right, thank you very much. Let me take you into the learning manager, into the learning record store. The learning record store, you'll see, and I'm going to pull out Tara. I hope you don't mind me pulling you out because you're here. Tara started the demo. She answered girl, got it wrong at 34, got it wrong at 44, and then got it right at 54. So I can actually see the path you took through. Had somebody have said boy, and no one said boy this afternoon, we would be able to see where somebody took a wrong path and went back and did it again. But actually, here's an opportunity to see exactly what somebody did. Now, I can have a look at the one person. Lots of ways of looking at the reports and the data. Your main verb was answered. I've got a timeline I've put in here so I can see who did it today or whatever. And I can see that there were 5 statements written while you just went through that small amount. If I go back to, I'm not going to go to what if. If you have a look at my timeline, I can see how many people have done this over a period of time, and I can see how busy the system has been. You'll notice that the completed is a pretty big one. I can have a look at completed. I can find out who's completed at that stage, so I can see all the people who have got to 54 and have completed the demo. Viv, I'm going to turn the audio back off again. There we go. End of, thank you. End of noise. Now you can go onto Saltbox and actually sign up for one of these today and have a play with it. It's free. You can do whatever you like. Here we go. Thank you. I can see Daryl's come in and started it. I can see where people have gone. I'm actually beginning to watch and see the data that I've got. I've got 185 statements now. So I'm actually beginning to see how many people have viewed an activity. So there are some items that have been viewed, and I can see how many people have viewed, and the only one that I've got as viewed is the AML regulations, because that's how I set it up. And depending on what you use for your verbs will depend on what sort of data you get back. And this is the place that we're now really learning from the early data that even we put into this as to the power of the verbs, that we can actually use lots of different verbs in different places to mean different things. So we have had some fun with this as well, even learning as we go. I've just reviewed the data. How do we use this data? Well, this is one of the big questions. I've just had to come off the phone from a conversation in the States on a conference call before I started with you guys today. And we've been discussing actually a set of data as to how can we use this to look at performance improvement, and how can we actually set some values. And I think these are the discussions that are just happening now. We're at version 0.95, actually at 0.96. Tin Can is going to release at the end of March, the beginning of April. It's going to happen straight after Learning Solutions in reality, where there'll be another Tin Can Alley and a number of last minute conversations as to what should be or shouldn't be in there. The code is set. It's not going to change. We know that. The only thing that's changing at the moment are some talks around the security and whether we're going to have signed statements or not. And the concept there is that only certain statements will be able to be written back to a certain LRS, as well as an LMS, based upon the fact that it's coming from outside. And therefore they should be security signed to make sure we don't get some fool works out how to write a statement and sends 10 million of them to mess your data up. So they're the sort of discussions that are just in the last throes before this actually goes live. How you start thinking about it now and how you start to implement it is now when we start to actually play with it. That's the basis of what Tin Can will do. So before I go further, let me ask you a question. Is this something you would be interested in doing? Is this something that you think you will do? Or is this something that you think you're going to keep at a 20-foot distance? I've thrown you another poll on the screen to ask you to have a quick look and make some decisions there. I was just about to open the microphones up because nobody had voted, but they started all coming in all at the same time. So I'm having a look. Interesting how I'm getting a large number. I'll close the poll in about another 5 seconds. So if you haven't voted, vote quick. Forever hold your peace. Too late. There we go. As long as it's included as part of your existing system. And I think that's the key to this, that we don't want to start to implement, and I don't think anybody wants to start to implement another learning record store or another learning system. I think the key here is that they do have to be a part of it, of what exists. There is, however, one very interesting point that I will make to you, that if you get an opportunity to say it, please do say it. From the early data that we've played around with in various places, I am absolutely convinced that we want to keep the learning record store data separate to the learning management system data. I think if we mix the metric with the analytic, we're going to get some skewed results. And that will actually cause, I would imagine, some problems in the short term until we all get to understand exactly what data we're looking for. A quick plug for some of the other tutorials that are out there. A couple of these you've missed already, sorry. There's on the 13th, there's a free tutorial of the ID for the modern world, which talks about a bit of the ID requirement. And there's a couple of places I think still left on it. I'll let you go and have a look at the rest of those at the learningcoach.co.uk. End of plug. I said I was going to leave you how to get hold of me, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually open your microphones up because I want to find out if there's any questions. I'm sure I've sparked some thought processes going around what Tin Can is. It's a really simple to set up system. It's not going to be complicated at all. The most complicated bit of it is going to be in the design of where it fits into your existing learning and how we design learning that's going to work with it onwards from here. How we actually write a statement and where it writes to is really a very simple system. So it shouldn't be very expensive to implement. However, I do think that you will probably need some help at day one to get your head around it and get it working. And got some firm ideas of the way to actually do that. I've opened your microphones up. If anybody's got any questions they would like to ask at this time. Don't all speak at once.
Neil, it's Neil Gavin.
Hello, Neil.
We've got a limited LMS on some old e-learning, and that's really about it. We don't have an LMS that tracks learning right across the organisation. That's one of the things we're looking at. Would Tin Can fill the gap if one implemented that immediately, or does it need an underpinning LMS?
Okay.
Does it need an LMS that will work with it?
Okay, if you ask two different people, you'll get two different replies to this. If you ask somebody who sells LMSs, they're going to tell you have to have an LMS to underpin it. Right. If you ask me who hasn't got any product to sell you, I'm going to tell you quite straightforwardly that Tin Can will do both in one, because at its absolute minimum, you can write a statement that says someone has started something and someone has completed something, and send a score if you want to send a score in a statement directly in the same way that you've just seen it work with the SMS system. And your learning can be wherever you want your learning to be. It doesn't necessarily have to be within a learning management system per se. Now, on the other side of the fence, there's an argument that says if you're going to be running with things like compliancy training, yes, you probably do need an LMS to be able to track and keep the records in that are separate from a metric point of view. I think that what the LRS and Tin Can is going to do is it's going to become a trainer's tool rather than a tool for the end user to see what they have done in their learning. I don't see the LRS as being able to be opened up to the end user to go sorting through their own data. This is a trainer's tool, a tool to be able to see who is doing what and why. So for argument's sake, if every male under the age of 40, which of course you and I fit into, who go to work wearing a blue shirt, all do the same thing, and you can track that and see that predominantly across the organization, that when you employ a new person under the age of 40 who wears a blue shirt, you can be almost guaranteed he's going to do the same thing. Now, if every time that it's done it costs the organization £1,000 in costs, you can actually throw an intervention into place to stop it happening. And that's the key to analytics. We were talking earlier in the conversation I had earlier, it was to do with the military in America. I can't say too much about what we were discussing, but we were discussing the fact of actually looking and seeing the way that people do things in the manner in which they do and how they would react. So it's raining, it's dark, they're under fire, and they're on their own. They're going to react differently than if it's dry and it's light and they're in a group of 50. And based upon that, we actually can start to see patterns of how people are doing things. And I think that's the key to this, and the importance of this is it's the data that we can use as trainers and as learning developers to understand the way that people are using our learning so we can deliver the next bit at the right time as they're going to need it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Now, the difference between the LMS and the LRS there is that, one's going to give us this data that we use. One's going to give us a management system of who did what and when, which we may need if we need to prove box ticking effectively.
Yeah. Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, ladies and gents?
Hi, Neil.
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can indeed. Hello, Darryl.
Hi. I was just going to ask a question. Is there any plans to the LRS to store it in the cloud at all? All I'm thinking there is there any chance of portability between, I'm at university, I've done a load of learning, I go to my first employer, I can move my learning record store to there, and then I move to another employer. So it builds up the history for me as I go. Is there any sort of plan to look at that sort of side of things?
Let me tell you the conversation I was in, and because I asked the same question, and this is where I'm at with it. Now, this is an LRS here, and if I have a look at the LRS on screen and I look at Daryl. I can see that Daryl's got, when it loads, you started, you completed your answer. There you go. Daryl's got 3. She'll kill you by getting it right first go. Daryl has got 3 items within his activity stream. Now, I said, how do we port this? Absolutely, I've moved job. I want to take this with me. Now, originally I said that each piece of this data should be in 2 halves. There should be the type of data that is yours, and there's the type of data that has got IP in it, which is the company's. And wouldn't it be nice if there was a learning record store domain name system that said Daryl Hobbins is tied to this learning record store, and if you moved, you would just send an instruction to that DNS to say, or that LNS to say, I've moved to this new record store. And what it would do is pick up all of your records and post them into the new record store, so they were there if they were sitting at actual servers. This one is sitting in the cloud. So there is, and that's one of the conversations that's ongoing at the moment, as to how we're going to have the portability of data. But I see it happening much easier than we've seen in the LMS, because the data in all of these is all written in the same way. If you use a verb that has never been seen by the learning record store before, it will add it on the fly. So by porting all the statements that you've got and sending those statements onwards to a new LRS, will basically populate the new LRS with all your data from the past really easily.
Sure, great stuff, Neil. Thanks.
A couple of questions came in on the chat, which I'll cover. Can you use TinCan to develop in rapid products such as Captivate, ActionScript, or PhoneGap, etc.? The answer to that question, quite straightforwardly, is if you go and have a look at the Articulate range of tools. So if you have a look at Storyline already has some form of TinCan built into it. And when I say some form, because I looked at it with Tom Coleman last week in London, and it's actually fixed as to what verbs you can use. And I made it quite clear to him that I thought that there had to be a much wider availability of verbs, which I think there will be. And he's taken that back to the States with him. But that's already in that tool. Yes, you're going to find it arriving in Captivate. I don't think you're going to find it in ActionScript so easily, because I think that what's going to happen with Flash is going to sort of disappear. But there's no reason why you couldn't call very, very simply a file that's sitting on a web server. Now, if I give you an idea from what you're looking at here, let me take you onto this screen here. This file here is called textinbound.php. This is a PHP file which is sitting on my server. And this PHP file, if I just get down to the right place, there's the piece here which actually is writing the JSON tin can statement into the LRS. And it does different statements at different places. Every time you see a curl up set, you'll see that that's a tin can statement being written. Now, all we're doing is calling a file on a web server. So a piece of ActionScript could quite happily, anything really could quite happily call a file in the same way with SMS. The SMS that you've sent has in the background called a PHP file on a web server, which has written the statement into the LRS that you're looking at that you're looking at here. So, Fiorina, the answer to Floria, sorry, your answer really is yes. It's going to be very easy if it's not in there already, and there's no reason why you shouldn't do it within PhoneGap. Really, fairly simple. Paul's asked a question about TinCan. Oh, it's disappeared up screen. And not a branching off to the standard. Paul, no, it's not a branching off the standard. It's actually in addition to. And maybe that's come through later on in the conversation. I think there's always going to be a place for the LMS. I think it's important for that record of learning that the learner can see. I really do believe that the tin can concept and the analytics is really for the other side of it. It's for the learning department developers to be able to actually understand what people are doing, so we can actually provide a better performance type of learning to the individual who fits into a particular group of people. I hope that answers your question, Paul. I've been asked, can you use Tin Can to develop in rapid product? That was already gone. You said thank you very much. All right, okay. So that's that. Any more questions? Anybody else? Your microphones are on if you've got a mic, or your phone's on if you're on a phone. Please shout now.
Hi Neil, this is Steve in Dumfries.
Hello, Steve.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, in the LMS, you're obviously recording the fact that someone's passed something, but you might be recording that based on the fact that they've done an awful lot of stuff into an LRS first. Would that be right?
Well, you could do. It's entirely up to you to mix and match. And what we have been playing around with and have very successfully done is take a piece of existing SCORM LMS learning that is tracking the start, the status, and a score at the end. And we've written statements onto the pages all the way through. So we can actually see what we call them nodes, the right place. Every time they pass a particular point or make a particular decision, we've written it into the LRS at the same time. So although the record is being completed in the LMS in normal SCORM, we've just introduced a piece of code into the HTML that SCORM is running to write a statement back to the LRS as well. So we're getting the best of both worlds.
So actually that's making the SCORM a lot more useful. It's not just start, in progress, finished. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's the record is there for the LMS, but we're also getting the LRS data so we can actually see the path that you took through the learning, what decisions you made, and how you overall fit in with the rest of the group of the people that you're working with. If everybody's making the same mistake, we can be guaranteed that the new person who comes in who's in the same team is going to make the same mistake as well.
That's great. Cheers.
So yeah, they do both. That's Steve Baxter, I assume, is it?
It is, yes.
Yeah, hi. Any more? We're coming up to 5 to 4. I'll leave up on the screen my details so you can actually see where we are. I'd like to give you one more poll before you go home, if I can. And that is, there we go. Was I horrific or phantasmagorical? It's always worth getting a bit of feedback somewhere down the line. If anybody wants to know more, there's how to get hold of me. If you need the number of the SMS system, if you didn't write it down, send me a message. I will be putting the recording of this. It's been recorded up online later on. It'll probably be tomorrow morning now because it takes about 2 hours to compile. But as soon as it's done, I'll send you all out an email with the address so you can actually go and watch it again. Don't forget to go and have a look at, gone too far, go and have a look at my new website. Give you a bit more of ideas of what I'm doing, and also go and have a look at the Learning Coach website where the list of all our other tutorials are. I'll leave my details on the screen. I'll hang on for a few moments. John, the answer to you is yes. If you want the slides, they're not in Keynote. Actually, these ones are in PowerPoint, but I quite happily send them over to you. If anybody, actually, what I'll do is I'll post them online as well, and I'll send it out in the same email. So if you want to download the slides, you can download the slides with the greatest pleasure. And I'll be online. I'll stay online for a few minutes after now. If you need me, just give me a shout either in the chat, and I'll turn my microphone back on again. I'd like to thank you all for attending this afternoon. I hope you got something out of this somewhere down the line. I hope it's got your brains thinking about the I did this statement, where Tin Can's going to slot in. I think it's going to be what we're all going to be talking about in about 6 months' time. So as early adopters, I think it's really important to get on board now and start to learn what the analytics can do for you before you start to implement it in a big way within your organization. Playing around with these freebies like Saltbox is something worth actually playing around with one project, even one existing piece of learning now, just so you can start to understand the data and understand what you need to start looking for. Hope you had a good time. Good afternoon all. Speak to you all soon.
Thanks, Neil.